Welcome back. You are watching KUTV Primetime News, and thank you for staying with us. Now to that particular conversation that we have been talking about. Cases of gender-based violence are rampant in Kenya, but are rarely documented. In line with the global campaign on 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, Omondi Otieno held a candid discussion with professionals from the Department of Sociology, Gender and Development Studies, focusing on GBV at workplaces. Listen in.
Kenya joined the rest of the countries around the globe to mark the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. The theme for the campaign was Orange the World, End Violence Against Women Now. It is the discussion we are having today with the main focus on GBV at workplaces. So thank you so much for dedicating your time for this discussion. We may first start by introduction. You introduce yourself to our viewers, they get to know who you are.
Thank you so much for having me and having us. My name is Dr. Grace Bonareri Mose Okongo. I am from the Department of Sociology, Gender and Development Studies.
Yes.
I'm a lecturer there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us again.
Okay, thank you for having us. My name is Dr. Pacifica Okemwa, the Chair, Department of Sociology, Gender and Development Studies here at Kenyatta University.
Right. So thank you so much for that. Now, we are talking about a campaign, activism against gender-based violence. So what is so necessary? Why is this campaign very important? And what are some of the activities that marks this campaign?
Let me start by defining gender-based violence.
Right.
This is the violence that women or men may suffer because of their gender. That is because they are men or because they are women. And gender-based violence literally takes very many forms. It can be sexual, it can be physical, it can be social, it can be economic. But why is it that we are so interested in gender-based violence?
Right.
It is actually an obstacle to development. It is an obstacle to the well-being of women and girls, as well as the men who suffer the various forms of gender-based violence.
Right.
Now, let me give you a few examples. In the era of COVID-19, we've had so many girls got pregnant. Have we stopped to ask ourselves how they got pregnant? Many of them are too young to even give consent, meaning some adult somewhere defiled them. You know, in the workplace, sexual and gender-based violence may also take many forms, and it stands in the way of that person who would rightfully get a job from getting that job, because someone else has used some uncouth methods of identifying who to give that particular job. So that's why it's important.
Right.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Now, Daktari, I would want us to talk about the root causes of gender-based violence. What are some of the causes for this kind of violence that you're experiencing in the workplaces?
Thank you for that very important question. The main cause of gender-based violence is power and control. Right. It has everything to do with power and control. There are many assumptions that gender-based violence is caused by a woman being nagging, or there is alcoholism, or there is something, poverty, lack of money, but those are usually called triggers of violence.
Right.
But violence is caused by gender inequality. You find that one person has more power than the other, they're going to find a reason to abuse or to cause gender-based violence. So simple and clear. Anytime you hear there is gender-based violence, you will know that one of the two people has more power than the other. So it's all about power and control.
Now, on the same note, Dr. You mentioned at a point that some gender-based violence takes some form where you find in a workplace someone is being promoted when they didn't deserve that promotion. Whoever deserved that promotion is not getting the promotion. So still on that, so in the workplaces, what are some of the forms of gender-based violence? Because you find that there are some people going through this, but they are unaware that, as he has mentioned, that this is a form of violence. They're going through them, but they don't know. So what are some of the forms of gender-based violence that you experience in the workplaces?
Wow, that's a fantastic question. Let me start answering that particular question from where perhaps my colleague has stopped.
Yes.
Power relations. Now, in most workplaces, you find that there are people who are well positioned to give promotions or to even provide an evaluation that can be positively be used to promote an individual. Now, what happens when such an individual who is well positioned wants to demand sexual favors in return for doing a duty he should be doing because it is his or her job?
Right.
He will say something like this: you know, my pen is very powerful. So verbal forms of violence.
Sure.
And you know, I have always told you, you know what to do when you want that kind of promotion. In other words, it's being assumed every woman should know that she needs to give in to a man for her to get the next promotion. Now, we must see gender-based violence in its various forms.
Right.
Let me take an example of sexual harassment, which is demanding for sexual relations from a person who is not welcoming that kind of act. Now, there is a continuum that forms. From the very first time this person who has power begins asking for these sexual relations, there's a build-up. He will not come the first day and say, by the way, I want sex with you, and if you give in, I'm going to promote you.
Sure.
It will never be something like that.
Yeah, no,
it will
right.
be something like, oh, day one, wow, your dress is wonderful. I wonder whether the man you stay with or you relate with even appreciates the beauty in you.
Sure.
Then the next day or a few days later, he will add in something else. If you give me an opportunity, I will demonstrate to you what real love is. And by the way, did you know what other benefits might arise as a result of that? And then come Friday, and the communication will be different. Even the dressing will be different, of course. And the communication will be something like, dinner today, you know where we need to talk about that promotion. Do you want it so bad? You know? And if you want, then you know what to do.
Sure.
Now, so it really, I've seen cases of secretaries, for example, who would be told by their bosses, I want you to stay along after 5 because there are these very important communications that you are going to type. And you know why 5? Because at that time there isn't so much noise. We shall even close the door and we are able to concentrate for a short period of time and deliver on this job. When 5 o'clock comes and the secretary moves to the boss's office with her notepad, the boss simply takes the notepad and puts it aside and says, you know what, are you daft or something? I was just trying to tell you, you're very nice and I want you, you know, and then the touching begins, and then there is a continuum that even may end up with rape.
Sure.
Or sexual coercion or something like that. So that's common in workplaces. Now, I also have seen situations where, for example, a boss is supposed to recommend which junior is going to go for a certain type of training where there are some allowances. And every now and again, the same person might end up being selected. So there are people who will keep on wondering, what is it that that person does?
Sure.
And the person who is selected will go for every manner of training. They will even repeat others. While those others who do not look favorable or who do not give in are left there, and therefore they end up losing out economically.
Right.
So we've talked about two forms of violence here. We've talked about sexual and we've talked about economic. If I don't get that promotion which I deserve, surely I'm losing economically. But there's also the bit about physical violence that happens in workplaces. For example, I noticed that some buildings have very narrow corridors. What do people do when they want to harass somebody? They time when that lady is or that man is going to be in that corridor, and they walk there and press their body against that person. They know very well, I mean, there is no space for that person to move out to. And so they will end up touching, parts of their body. And this is very, very inappropriate. And it's not something that should be done at the workplace.
Right.
Yeah, and of course, it creates a very hostile environment. You can imagine I've come here to deliver on my lectures, and somebody is keen on touching me inappropriately. That already sends different, emotions through me, and I might not even be able to deliver on my job.
Right.
Thank you.
Now,
I wanted to add a little bit about the types of violence that we have noticed in workplaces.
Yeah.
One of the things that could happen is people can actually physically beat you up. Maybe you did something wrong, and rightfully so, you messed up something. There are some bosses who may not control themselves. They are not supposed to beat you. There are legal systems they are supposed to follow if you did something wrong. But there are actually cases where they will physically mishandle you, beat you, injure you, like that.
Right.
But I also want to say that there are cases where a man can follow you from home. A man who maybe you have a relationship with can follow you to the workplace and beat you up. And in most cases, those who are at workplace don't have a way of protecting you.
Sure.
Or don't have a system in place of protecting you. So you are beaten up and it's assumed this is a family issue, and it is left like that. But at the workplace with colleagues, there are places where you might find a man coming and massaging you on your back like this. It looks like a joke, but that's violence. Why is somebody massaging you on your back? Or you are sitting somewhere in a meeting, then they take their foot and start touching you with their foot like that. And the meeting is going on, discussions are going on, and somebody is touching you like that. So that is violence, but many people don't notice it as violence.
Right.
And some of it is about names. I have had a lot of cases where somebody says these words that we hear everywhere, even everywhere, that chick, those words are not okay to use.
Right.
There are types of violence and they should not. Now I want to mention what kind of violence happens in the banks mostly. In the banks, a man may accompany the woman and force her to take a loan that they are not supposed to take, or force her to withdraw the money. But now the managers in the bank, the tellers, are not even aware on how to notice when this woman is under pressure and she gets the money out, like that. So those are scenarios that a lot of Kenyans may not be aware of to be types of violence, because this kind of education that you see, like gender-based violence, is like this is how you identify it. They are not, these conversations are not held enough for people to be able to even identify that somebody has come all the way from home with a woman, and they are literally taking all their money from their account without anybody knowing to make a stop of it.
Right.
Yes.
Now, Dr. There's often a conspiracy of silence surrounding GBV, where you find the victims of GBV are undergoing unspeakable pain and in the hands of the perpetrators. So what are some of the measures taken to ensure that the victims of GBV can, open up, they can, they can find avenues to go and report some of these cases?
A very interesting question. Thank you for that. Perhaps we would start by asking ourselves why the silence, and then my colleague can talk about what is it that needs to be done.
We can take that.
Why the silence? Most of the time, this silence is about socialization. In my family, for example, I have been socialized not to speak about certain things, more so about matters about sexuality and sexual relations. If I'm going to be a respectful person, these are things I should really, really not speak about. And therefore, when it happens, I remember, oh my God, I'm not supposed to speak about that. And then there is also the bit of the stigma that is associated with sexual violence. A woman that is violated is kind of spoiled goods, let me put it that way. And therefore, if people know that this has happened to me, they already begin to refer to me as that woman who was raped, and therefore the kind of person men should keep off from. And of course, I want to continue having those relationships that are, of course, healthy. And so I'm going to keep silent. And then there's also a very thin line. In my socialization, some of these things were presented as normal. I saw it happening to my parents, my sister. I saw it happening to my aunties. Why should I, think that it is different? So that kind of socialization and the myths around relationships between men and women, those myths need to be broken down so that we can actually have healthy relationships, relationships that are, speak to integrity, speak to the rights of each and every individual.
Right. Now, Dr. You've mentioned about the silence. The silence is caused up mostly about from the stigmatization that is involved with these gender-based violence. So, explain to us, have there been avenues that have been created for people to open up, to find at least a neutral environment where they can report these cases of gender-based violence?
Yes and no. And I will answer this question this way, that we do have systems in place here in Kenya. We do have even a hotline that you can call. I think the national hotline is 1195 that you can call and report. But the question is, when you call that hotline, and also we have the police where we are mandated to report if we are abused. We can go to Nyumba Kumi, we can go to the chief, we can go to the sub-chief, and there is a whole lot of system from the top to the bottom, and, or from the bottom to the top. But now there is a problem. When the people you are supposed to respond to are not aware, the agenda brand, they are not aware of the issue because of the socialization that we go through. A woman will come and report, here I am, I have been battered by my husband. And how do they respond? They may not even listen to you. They will tell you, go home and respect your husband. They will start laughing at you. Maybe you were knocked, your eye is bleeding. They will ask you, what did you do to deserve this? They will make fun of a situation that is very dangerous. And they will even send you back. As you know, or maybe you don't know, we don't have even enough shelters in this country. And we don't even have a national framework that will guide shelters, even the few that are available. How then will a woman go speaking up, knowing that she's going back home to this perpetrator? Can you report somebody knowing you have no other place to go? A lot of women are not economically independent.
Yes.
And even those who are economically independent are not aware of the issues and dynamics of gender-based violence. And a man will even apologize and say, oh, okay, that happened, it was a mistake, I'm done, I'm not going to beat you again. 2 days later, he's beating you again. So there are so many dynamics of violence. First of all, if you don't know where to go, you can't just start talking. You will be silent. In places where the systems work well, you will be able to go to a shelter. You will be able to go to a policeman that you know knows what violence is all about,
yes,
and knows exactly what to do, how to collect the evidence. Even the healthcare providers are supposed to be trained so that when you go to the police, you get a P3, you take that P3 to be completed both by the police and the healthcare providers, collect the evidence of the harm done to you, whether it was physical or sexual, and then you are able to be helped to go to court where you can hold the perpetrator to account. That system here in Kenya is affected a lot, affected by corruption, affected by the professionals who work with the issue. They don't understand deeply how critical that process is and must be handled properly. So you find that this broken system does not help the woman.
Right.
And don't forget, men also get affected by violence.
Sure.
So when we are talking about violence, we know that the greater numbers of violence happen to the women.
Yes.
Majority of the women are survivors. But we have areas where men also get affected. Mostly verbal violence, but even these other violences are there. So without proper working systems and I can explain how that system should be working, when a woman gets violated, she's supposed to report to the local police officer, and in the local police units, they are mandated to have gender-based violence desks, where a woman is supposed to go there and report a case and be helped, and that procedure starts right there. But right now, if you go to many police stations, you will either find no one is there, or whoever is there does not understand what to do.
Sure.
Because they have not been trained to understand what their role is, and that whole process gets broken like that from there. And the few shelters that we have, you can't just walk into a shelter because there is a shelter there. There is a process that you follow before you get into that shelter. You have to be mandated from the police, the state, in other words, the nation. Somebody has to mandate you that now you are in danger, you should be the one to go there. And such cases that are considered dangerous are usually very few and very minute. Very few, minimal. The acute ones, like really life is in danger. So before your life is considered to be in danger, the shelters don't allow you to go in.
Sure.
So what options do you have? So literally I can sit here and say, in Kenya we don't have a helpful system that can help women escape violence. And even those women who don't need to go to the shelters, they don't have enough knowledge to understand when violence is actually hurting them.
Right.
You will find that a woman steps out of violence to seek help when she's really feeling like now there is no way here. And so we have certain organizations here in Kenya, like the Nairobi Women Hospital has a gender violence recovery center.
Yes.
We have Makweni Recovery Center. So there are so few.
Right.
We don't have, and those shelters that exist in this country are usually held by individuals, civil organizations. So there is a huge need in this country.
Right.
First, to have a framework, to have enough shelters, to fund those shelters, because even those shelters which exist, they can barely hold more than 20 people, maybe less. Because who is funding them? They don't have facilities to hold many people.
Right.
And yet, violence is very rampant in this country, True.
Maybe to conclude, I would want to add two things. Number one, there is need for real awareness education that starts from the lowest institution of society, the family, the school, the church, the community, to institutions of all manners, like the universities, workplaces, and all that. And secondly, Legislations need to be implemented.
Right.
In this country, we have very good laws. Many good laws, but the good laws cannot implement themselves.
Sure.
You know, and we must really stop this whole idea of assuming that some forms of violence don't hurt anybody.
Right.
Sexual harassment, sexual forms of gender-based violence hurts. And it is detrimental to community. Thank you very much.
All right. Now, probably even as we conclude this, what will be your final words to the general public? What do they need to know in terms of gender-based violence that happens in the workplaces, in terms of what's the right procedure of reporting and who are the right people? And she's mentioned about the implementation of policies. Who are the people who are supposed to, you know, come into place to ensure that the good laws that we have as a country are fully implemented?
I think that gender-based violence is everyone's business. If we are serious in ending violence, it should be my business, your business, and everybody's business.
Right.
It should be, if people have power, you know, they have positions of responsibility, I think they need to take action and put policies in place. But it should be everyone's business. Right. I want to mention something that happens in Congo, even though I don't want to go into many details. There is the Tamal campaign in Congo, which they have used to end violence that was so pandemic. It was a pandemic in Congo because of the war, TRC, right. Because of the war there. They started this very basic methodology of ending, you know, violence through the Tamal campaign, referring to Samuel II, where the woman Tamal was raped by the brother. And they used those biblical texts to elaborate on how violence happens in the family and what usually happens. And usually when they go through those conversations, there is an angle of critical consciousness, where people question themselves. Yes, this person has been raped, but how does this affect us all? Because when there is violence in the family, it doesn't simply affect one person. It is affecting the entire family. So having those kinds of conversations within the family, looking deep, how does this affect the children? Because when you are hurting the mother, the children suffer. Sure. When you are hurting the mother, everybody who is in that environment suffers. Sure. When people look deeply into that, I think violence can end. Right. But it's everybody's responsibility to educate themselves. It is everybody, like now this week of 16 days of activism, we have a responsibility to know what it is. We have a responsibility to step up and help a survivor. Right. And the people who are dead are called victims. But those who have survived violence, they are called survivors. And we have a responsibility to do one act to end violence anywhere where they are. Right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for dedicating your time for this discussion. I hope we will still have such kind of discussion so that we have enough sensitization and creating awareness so that people get to know what they need to do in terms of you know, safeguarding themselves from gender-based violence. It is my pleasure to having you. We hope to have these discussions again and again. That has been the Daktaris talking about gender-based violence on the 16 weeks of activism on gender-based violence. Thank you for watching.